Good morning, students. We were trying to understand the concept of learning along with some of the theories which were developed by some of the psychologists. In the previous class, we have discussed about the trial and error learning, which is developed by one of the famous psychologists called E.L. Thorndike. Now, today, let us move on to the next element which comes under the same, that is the theories of learning. So, and these theories, we now would like to discuss about the next theory, which is known as conditioning theories. Learning by conditioning. So, in conditioning, we have two categories again, but as the name itself indicates, it is a method or it is a technique where we do use some of the technicalities for better understanding of the concept of learning, I can say. So in a literal sense, conditioning means getting used or adjusted to a
Hello.
new situation. When
Online
we
class.
have different circumstances or situation, at the initial stage, it may feel very difficult for us to adjust to the new situation. But after time, after we pass time, or if we tried adjusting ourselves to the living condition or a stimulus, it will become one of the important element only. It will become important part of our life. So how we need to adjust to the living conditions, how we try to adjust to the new situations, that will definitely make some changes in our behavior. So that is what conditioning. So getting ready for the new elements of the situations of the conditions. Right now we are all adjusted to online classes. After a few days, if suppose everything will be okay, again we may all meet through the help of offline mode. So however the conditions are, whatever the conditions we may experience, according to the conditions we do behave. We behave in a family in a one form, whereas we do behave that we will not behave the same like how we behave in the family outside of the family. When we are at the playground, we used to behave according to that condition. When we are there in the classroom as a learner, we do behave in some other conditions. So in front of whom we are actually standing, based on that we used to adjust ourselves. So conditioning will help us to adjust to any type of condition or a situation in which we are all actually living in. So most of the learning takes place through the help of conditioning only. So psychologists, for that purpose only, they have focused more on conditioning, such as sucking at the sight of the milk bottle, making grimaces in the response to dislike, smiling in a response to others' smile. So how is the behavior of the opposite person? Based on that, we used to behave. So most of the time, according to the condition in which we are all living in, we used to respond. We used to converse. So from that point of view, how conditioning play an important role? What are the mechanisms which are used for conditioning? That we shall study right now. So based on the nature of conditioning, psychologist theories were categorized into two important subsegments. One is as the classical conditioning and the second one as operant conditioning. So based on the nature of conditioning that we used to adjust or what we are doing. So from that point of view, the conditioning learning styles are categorized into two important segments. One as classical conditioning learning and second one is operant conditioning learning. What they are, how important they are, let's see. The first one is classical conditioning. What is this? So it is a learning process that occurs when two stimuli are repeatedly paired. I will repeat. Classical conditioning is a process that occurs when two stimuli simultaneously are repeatedly paired. A response which is at the first elicited by the second stimulus is eventually elicited by the first stimulus alone. We will study this theory or this statement with the help of the experiment which is conducted later. And even operant conditioning is again one form of learning where our behavior is most of the time controlled by different consequences that we used to experience. So the key concepts which were used in operant conditioning are the type of positive reinforcement that should have to be done. Next is negative reinforcement. Sometimes that also matters. Positive reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. So like that, we have different forms of Reinforcement is the main highlight of operant conditioning. Let's see what they are, how important they are, and how the psychologists conducted the experiment like Thorndike, when Thorndike developed the theory called trial and error. So classical conditioning theory, which is popularly known as Pavlov's classical conditioning theory. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. I will repeat, Ivan Petrovich Pavlov is the name of a person who has developed this theory called classical conditioning. So this theory is still remembered with the same person's contribution. So it is known as Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. Okay, Pavlov is the name of the psychologist. So his full name is Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. What is that? Let's see. Yes, first, before explaining the theory, what I thought is I would like to show you the experiment, how it was conducted. Okay, just try to have a glance. If possible, you can take a screenshot of this. So though I would like to share this slide after the class, but still you can, while explaining, you can just go through the screenshot. So he conducted, see, Thorndike conducted his experiment on cat. Okay, whereas Ivan Petrovich Pavlov conducted his experiment on a dog. Okay, so this is the arrangement. This is the table which is prepared by Pavlov for conducting this experiment. Okay, so this is the dog. And there is an arrangement of a food plate where the food is provided. So, and this is the tube. You can see a tube here. Tube for collecting saliva from the subject's mouth, means it is nothing but the dog's mouth. So usually the natural reaction when food is seen by the dog is production of saliva, isn't it? Whenever the dog is shown or it was offered a form of food which is very much interested or which is very favorite food of a dog, then definitely it will start secretion of saliva. Okay, or it will start producing the saliva. So there is an arrangement in the table and it is completely restricted in this area, so it will not move on. Okay, these are the arrangements which were allowed, which will not allow them, which will not allow the dog to move further. So restricted form where the dog will not take movements. So this is like how the arrangements were made. Like how Thorndike prepared a puzzle box in the same form, he has prepared a table, okay, experimental table, where the dog is arranged or the dog is given the space like this. Okay, and there is an arrangement, and this is a mirror. Okay, behind this mirror there is an experimenter who used to sit and who used to observe, but the dog will not see who is there beside the mirror, but the experimenter can see what is the behavior of this dog. And this is the plate where the food is to be provided. Okay, and this is the way how amount of saliva which is collected here, it can be replaced. This is just, you have this try to have this idea in your mind, so that I would like to explain the theory now. So this is how the arrangements were made for this particular condition. That is what Pavlov's experiment. So as I said, the method of conditioning got its name from the fact that it is a kind of learning situation that usually existed in the earlier experiments. So as I said, this theory was developed by one of the important person called Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, who is basically from Russia. Russian psychologist he is. Ivan Pavlov was a famous Russian psychologist who lived between 1849 to 1936. He made many discoveries in the psychology field, and he is the person who got one of the highest award in the world, that is Nobel Prize in psychology, that too in the year 1904. So he must be remembered for his contribution for his theory. Now let us see what the classical conditioning is. So classical conditioning is a learned or a reflex response that you do when evoked by a stimulus. Just let me explain that experiment so that it will help you to get some more information about the same. As I said, Pavlov designed an apparatus or a table where to measure the quantity of saliva which was produced by response after showing the meat powder or the meat. As a dog is very much familiar, or the food which is very much usually attracts the dog, that dog is the meat or the meat powder. But how he started his experiment, let's see. Ivan noted that no saliva flowed when he rang the bell. Earlier, what he did is, just I would like to show this picture. Yes. So he started his experiment by showing what at the initial stage he was not provided any sort of food. Just try to listen to me. Huh? First time, he is the experimenter sitting beside this mirror. ಈ ಕನ್ನಡಿ ಹಿಂದ್ಗಡೆ ಅವನು ಕುತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ. So at the initial stage, what he did is he rang the bell. ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ. There will be no reproduction of saliva. ಆ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ನಾಯಿ ಜೊಲ್ಲನ್ನು ಸುರಿಸಲಿಲ್ಲ. At the beginning of his experiment, Pavlov noted that no saliva flowed when he rang the bell. That is the first thing. Next, he then trained the dog by sounding the bell and shortly afterward presenting the food. So at the initial stage, what he did is he rang the bell, but there will be no changes. ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನಾಯಿ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಕಟ್ಟಿ ಹಾಕಿದಂತ ನಾಯಿ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಒಂದು ಸಂದರ್ಭ ಸನ್ನಿವೇಶ ಈ ಟೇಬಲ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರುವಂತ ನಾಯಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯ ರಿಯಾಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ಕೊಡಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಬರೀ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದವನ್ನು ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ. At the initial stage, he rang a bell, but there will be no production of saliva in this particular instrument or in this pot or in this object. But later, second attempt, what he did is he rang the bell. Along with that, what he did is he provided some food, a meat powder. He then trained the dog by sounding the bell and shortly afterwards presenting the food. So second attempt, what he did is along with the bell of the along with the sounding of that bell, he just presented food which is favorite to the dog. After the sound of the bell had been fed with food few times, he tested the effects of the training by measuring the amount of saliva that flowed when he rang the bell and did not present the food. See, first what he did is he just rang the bell, there is no production of saliva. Second time, he produced the sound, or he made the dog use he has given some training. So at the initial stage, the training was given to the dog where everything is to be managed. And later, one second, I think, yes, I will continue.
ಅದು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹೇಳಕ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Sorry, there was a disturbance. Yes, somebody came to my room. Yes, let me continue. Okay, at the initial stage, the bell, there is a production of the bell. There is no production of saliva. Second time, the sounding of the bell was followed by food, meat. So there, automatically, the dog start producing the saliva. ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ, ಮಾಂಸದ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ನಾಯಿ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಜೊಲ್ಲನ್ನು ಸುರಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿತು. So the same was continued for number of times, ringing of the bell and producing the meat, ringing of the bell, producing the meat, ringing of the bell, producing the meat. So like this, that was continued for number of times. So when this experiment was conducted for number of times, later what happened is, initially at the initial point of view, the dog was unable to produce the saliva. Later what happened, when the bell along with food is provided, when the dog heard the sound of the bell, Along with that, whenever the dog used to hear the sound of the bell, dog is used to be received with some sort of food or the meat. So the same process was continued for number of times, like ringing of the bell, production of the sound, and providing the food, meat powder. So this was continued for number of times. After few practice of this, what happened is later the dog came to know that. So this type of a training was given by that experimenter, and dog that whenever I used to see, and in meantime, the saliva which is produced by the dog in this experiment was collected and it was noticed. It was calculated or it was recorded. So what sort of quantity the saliva was produced by the dog. ಆ ನಾಯಿ ಸುರಿಸಿದಂತಹ ಜೊಲ್ಲನ್ನ ಆ ಒಂದು ಮೆಜರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಏನ್ ಎಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಇದೆ ಇದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ಕಲಿ ಹಾಕಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಅಳತೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Every time whenever the bell was rang, the food is to be provided, and that production of saliva is to take place by the dog, and that is to be calculated. So like that, the theory, so that experiment was conducted for number of times. Every time the saliva which is produced by the dog is collected and it was calculated. So that was the thing, that how they actually did. Later on, what happened? Next, first production of sound, only producing the sound, there is no saliva. Second time, producing the sound along with providing some of the meat, production of saliva is continued. And after some practice of the same element, again they stopped. The experimenter stopped providing food, but he just continued producing the sound or ringing of the bell. But still, after a few days of practice of the same previously known activity, like whenever the ring used to bell or whenever there is a production of the sound, there will be the opportunities were created and the situations created in such a way where the dog is going to get the food. ಎರಡನೇ ಸಲ ಏನ್ ಮೊದಲನೇ ಸಲ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಏನು ಕೊಡಲಿಲ್ಲ, ನಾಯಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯ ವರ್ತನೆಯನ್ನು ತೋರಿಸಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಎರಡನೇ ಸಲ ಗಂಟೆಯ ಶಬ್ದವನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿದಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ಕೊಡಲಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಆ ನಾಯಿಗೆ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಗಂಟೆಯನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗೆಲ್ಲ, ಗಂಟೆಯನ್ನ ಎರಡನೇ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ಕೊಡುವ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಯೋಗವನ್ನು ಬಹಳ ಸಲ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಫೈನಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ನಾಯಿ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಜೊಲ ಸುರಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡ್ತದೆ. ಆ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ತಿನ್ನುವ ಧಾವಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಅನುಬಂಧ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಡ್ತದೆ. ಆಫ್ಟರ್ few days of practice of this training, immediately the experimenter stopped providing food, but where he just provided or he just produced the sound of the bell. ಆ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದವನ್ನು ಮಾತ್ರ ಕೇಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹಚ್ತಾನೆ. But third time what happened is, in the first time ಬರೀ ಸೌಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನಾಯಿ ಜೊಲ್ ಸುರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಎರಡನೇ ಸಲ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದದ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾಯಿ ಜೊಲ್ ಸುರಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿತ್ತು. ಅದನ್ನು ಬಹಳ ದಿನಗಳವರೆಗೆ ಅದೇ ತರಬೇತಿಯನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ ನಾಯಿಗೆ ಅನುಬಂಧನ ಒಳಪಟ್ಟಿತ್ತು, ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಆಯ್ತು. ಯಾವಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಯಾವಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ ಆಹಾರ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ. ಲೈಕ್ that was a condition, that like how the dog was conditioned. Next time what he did is he just stopped providing the food whenever he used to ring the bell. ಆ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದವನ್ನು ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಂದಿನ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಆಹಾರ ಕೊಡೋದನ್ನ ಬಿಟ್ಟ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. There was a change which was actually taken place, where the dog was not provided any sort of saliva at the initial stage, at the first stage, but after second stage, when he again started the same, not providing the food, but he used to ring the bell in the third phase. But what was the change was observed is, the dog still continued providing or producing the saliva in the same amount. ಎರಡನೇ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಏನು ಜೊಲ್ಲನ್ನು ಸುರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು ನಾಯಿ, ಅದೇ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದ ಜೊಲ್ಲನ್ನ ಮೂರನೇ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಹಾರವನ್ನು ಕೊಡದೇ ಇದ್ರೂ ಸಹ ಆ ಗಂಟೆ ಶಬ್ದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ನಂಗೆ ಆಹಾರ ಬರ್ತದ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನಾಯಿ ಜೊಲ್ಲನ್ನ ಸುರಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿತ್ತು. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಹೌ he made the same dog into 3 different segments. That is what we need to understand under this particular theory. Okay, so I1 classical conditioning, now we can try to understand this. Pavlov performed experiments with dogs and to collect the saliva. He noticed that the dogs would salivate when powdered meat was present. The same Pavlov associated the ringing of the bell with the presence of powdered meat. He rang the bell every time the dogs were served the food. Pavlov started ringing the bell and the dogs would salivate without the powdered meat being present. Thus, what we need to understand is we can make any changes in the form of association of conditioning. That is what we need to understand through the help of this theory. That is what classical conditioning learning. Next theory that we need to study is about operant conditioning theory, which is given by B.F. Skinner. This is developed by a psychologist called B.F. Skinner. What is his contribution? Let us see. Even he has prepared a puzzle box. Okay, he took rat. Okay, so these are the arrangements. There is a speaker. There are some signal lights. There is a lever. If you touch this lever, food. This is the pellet, and this is the dispenser tube. Okay, here there is an arrangement of shock. Okay, these are the grids, and this is the food cup. This is the food cup, where whenever this rat touches this lever, like how the cat of Thorndike, whenever it pulls the lever, the door will open. No, in the previous experiment, like that. This was the puzzle box prepared by B.F. Skinner. It is known as a Skinner box only, where he took rat as far as experiment is considered. Whenever this rat touches this lever, it will be provided with some food grains. Food grains are favorite food for these type of animals, right? ಸೊ ಆಹಾರ ಧಾನ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ ದ್ವಿದಳ ಧಾನ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಕೊಡುವಂತ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಈ ಒಂದು ಭಾಗವನ್ನ ಟಚ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ, ಈ ಒಂದು ಅಂಶವನ್ನ ಟಚ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ accidentally, it was not trained rat. Okay, whenever rat used to touch this part, that is lever, it will be provided with some of the food grains in this what I can say food pellet. Okay, that is what how this arrangement was made. Let's see. So the materials which were used by Skinner box for his experiment is, okay, the Skinner box, which is a very small chamber in which an animal learns how to make a particular response for which the consequence can be controlled by the researchers. It contains a speaker, signal lights, there is a lever, there is a food dispenser which usually dispenses food pellets like in the form of food grains, and the grid floor which can deliver a mild electric shock. So there is also a cumulative recorder which records the frequency and speed of the desired response, which is made by the pressing of the lever. So that was the materials, those were the materials which were used by Skinner in his experiment, we can say. Now, what else you can see in this theory? So the procedure which is followed by Skinner is, yes. So a hungry rat was placed in the Skinner box. Again, the rat was very hungry, and every time whenever the rat used to press the lever, it was rewarded with a food pellet in the food dish, which was used to reinforce its behavior. Here, whenever it touches this lever, it will be provided with the food. So this is the way how this experiment was conducted, and what happened later. Let's see. The results of these experiments are rats scurried around the box, randomly touching the different parts of the floor and wall. It just tried to, it was not knowing that there are such arrangements that whenever it touches the lever of the box, it is going to be provided with what? The food grains. So it start wandering here and there from one direction to another, but accidentally or unfortunately or fortunately, knowingly or unknowingly, it touched the part of the lever of the box, and finally it got what? The food grains. Eventually, the rat accidentally touched the lever and a food pellet was released. The same sequence was repeated again and again, like the Thorndike theory. So the same rat, hungry rat, was placed in the same puzzle box, Skinner box. Whenever accidentally it touches the lever, it used to be provided with food pellet. And there was an arrangement in the thought process of the rat that if I wish to get the food, what I need to do is I should have to touch the lever and I should have to get the food. So like that, the same sequence was repeated again and again, and with more trials, the time taken to press the lever eventually decreased. Earlier, it took 5 or 10 minutes, but eventually, when the same activity was carried out again and again, the time which is to be taken by the same rat for the first time, say for example, if it took 10 minutes, next time it took only 8 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and whenever next time, after a few days of practice, if the rat was placed in this box, it will not take much time. It will directly go to the liver part and it will touch the liver. It will get the food grains and it will eat. So that is the way how it was actually initiated. So the same sequence was repeated with more trials. The time taken to press the lever eventually decreased. The random movements of the rat eventually became deliberate. Rats then ate food as fast as they could press the lever. So whenever we used to have the different forms of conditioning that can be done on that. So in that way, we should have to understand how important the theory of this operant conditioning is. So we have it, our own significant element. So what we need to understand from the with the help of the Skinner's operant conditioning is reinforcement. Reinforcement, which is one of the important aspect of this experiment. Again, there were two divisions, as I said earlier. There may be positive reinforcement or it may be a negative reinforcement. Operant conditioning is useful in shaping the undesirable behavior. Whenever a person used to work in an insignificant form, there what happens is we need to change the undesirable behavior of any personality. This is also useful in training of mentally retarded children in the schools for how to dress, how to eat. Okay, it may be as per toilet training skills are considered, or if there are any phobias, so even to treat such phobias, or if there are students or the people who are addicted to drug or alcohol addictions, so for avoiding these all things, the negative reinforcement should have to be given so that we can come out from the those negative impacts. So one or another way, we are influenced by these two important theories called operant conditioning, and one more is classical conditioning theory.